We thought about the kind of problems that we get in every day from HR professionals, managers who a question has just come to them which they have to deal with, and it's out of the blue and they've no idea absolutely what to do about it. And so we decided to put together the kind of top 10 tricky employment law problems. Is your consultant really an employee? What is a contractor or a consultant? A consultant enters into a contract for services. They don't buy the labour, they buy the end product of the labour. Whereas an employee going into employment, they're there to do a job. They're there to buy the individual for a set amount of hours per day, per hours per day. A consultant is independent and responsible for making his own decisions, his or her own decisions in performing the job. They stand on their own 2 feet, usually pay tax. An employee is subject to the directions of the employer. That's the basic kind of issues that you're looking at when you're looking at whether or not your consultant or the person you propose to take as a consultant is one or is going to be an employee. There's often, and also the fact that somebody's a consultant doesn't mean that you as an employer will escape liability. They may be, quote unquote, a person employed, even though they're not an employee for the purposes of discrimination legislation or worker for whistleblowing. So just because they're a consultant, it doesn't confer all the advantages that you'd think. Ultimately, when you are looking at whether somebody is a consultant or an employee, there are certain factors you've got to take into account. Control. What is does the employer control the way the work is done? How is the work organised, and does the consultant have a say in its organisation? Or are they imposed upon? Are they told to do a job in a particular way?
Having legal representation at disciplinary hearings, it's actually a question that we are getting asked fairly frequently, and certainly on the occasions where we get inquiries from employees, they're really quite keen to know whether or not they can bring a lawyer with them to a disciplinary meeting. The first thing to say is no. There's no general rights under UK law for them to be legally represented in a disciplinary meeting. Their right under the ACAS Code, under statute, is that they can be accompanied by a fellow worker or colleague or a union representative. It feels like we can't go more than about a month or two without a new case being on this area, and I think, to be honest, we probably could have had an hour's talk just on this and you all would have fallen asleep. So what I've chosen to do is focus on a very specific area of this topic. But before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty, I just wanted to show you my pyramid, which I'm very proud of, actually. I'm going to take all the credit, but actually this was our lovely marketing team who made this for me, because my IT skills are not this good. An employee gets 28 days holiday. Maybe you give more than 28 days. Maybe you give 28 days plus bank holidays. That's probably what I see most often in the workplace. And I wanted to just show you that entitlement actually comes from various different bits of legislation. So at the bottom, we've got what we call Working Time Directive holiday. Now that is European legislation which says that all workers working 5 days a week must get 4 weeks or 20 days. European legislation needs to be incorporated into the UK by a UK enabling legislation. So we then had the working time regulations, which said, yes, we'll allow British workers to have their 20 days, but we're going to improve that. We're going to offer a bit more, which is why we've got 28 days as the minimum statutory entitlement in the UK. So we're either 4 weeks and 20 days, and then the working time regulations gave an extra 1.6 weeks, so 5.6 in total, or the 28 days. Anything on top of the 28 days that the employer chooses to give is voluntary, according to the organisation. So we call that contractual holiday. So just a few kind of key cases that you'll probably be familiar with, certainly the 2009 ones. We started off in Europe, 2009, with the ECJ confirming that under the Working Time Directive, workers on sick leave continued to accrue their holiday rights. So that changed things quite substantially back in 2009. We then had this problem with our legislation being in conflict, and the case went all the way to the House of Lords and the House of Lords said, well, we accept that our national legislation is in conflict, but we need to do what we can to interpret our legislation in line with the European decision, and therefore we had confirmation that in the UK, workers would continue to accrue their holiday whilst off sick. And then in 2012, so this year, we have the case of, I think it's ANGED. It's a very long named case. I think I put it in your notes, but I certainly can't pronounce it, and I'm not going to try to. But this involved an employee who was on holiday and then said that they were sick, which is every employer's worst nightmare, really, isn't it? How do you monitor that? It's, you know, it's the person's abroad. How do you know if they've genuinely had an upset stomach, or if they've had a skiing accident, or whatever it might be? So again, the ECJ confirmed that, yes, if that happens, if the employee is sick whilst they're already on holiday, they need to be allowed to carry that over and reschedule it as well. So quite an interesting decision, and one I think that has probably hit employers the hardest, because they're, you know, quite concerned about advantages being taken by members of staff in that respect.
As Carrie said, the threshold of what is a disability is actually very low. You have to have, or the employee has to have, any physical or mental impairment. It used to use the word medically well recognised under the old legislation, which meant there were all sorts of disputes as to whether stress, for example, was a medical impairment, or whether it was something less than that, albeit the stress can obviously be very difficult. Now, that test has gone. It's much clearer. Any physical or mental impairments, including stress. It can include anxiety. It can include something where there isn't a known cause for the medical issue. For example, as mentioned, muscular weakness in one case. You needn't establish the cause of the impairment. You just need to show that the symptoms are real. Is this person suffering from some kind of medical symptoms without necessarily knowing the cause of it? Again, the focus is not on the medical diagnosis of the condition, but the effects of the condition.